The VR game market is dying. There hasn't been a good game released since Boneworks and Half-Life Alyx, and those games both came out over 2 years ago. So while we all wait for Bone Labs to come out, I'm taking on the task of reviving the VR game industry by creating the greatest VR game ever. But there's one problem. I kind of don't know what I'm doing or how to make a VR game. So I did a little research and I figured out how to set up a VR project in Unity. And it's actually pretty simple. All you need to do is go into the project settings and install XR plugin management, install the OpenXR plugin, go into the package manager and install the OpenXR package, then click add package from get URL and install a secret package named XR Interaction Toolkit by entering this specific address, install the XR Interaction Toolkit sample assets, go into the sample assets folder and add each action to the default action controller, go into the preset manager and specify which actions go with each controller, then you add an XR Origin game component and attach an input action manager component to it. In the input action manager component, add the default action controller from the XR Interaction Toolkit sample assets as an action asset, and there we go. Now we have a working VR project in Unity, and it's just that simple. But as you can see, I don't have any hands, and hands are a pretty important part of most VR games. And luckily for me, Oculus has some free hand models for people to use. So I downloaded these hands and I dragged them into my game, and boom, working hands. Except they're not working hands, because right now my hands can just pass through objects, which turns out to be a pretty big immersion breaker in VR. And it also turns out that creating physics-based hands is a little bit more complicated than I originally thought. So I followed this great tutorial on how to make physics-based hands in Unity, and boom, working hands. Almost. As you can see, currently the physics interactions aren't very realistic, but the good news is I can just go into the project settings and increase the amount of physics calculations, and boom, working hands. So now I have a fully functional pair of hands, except they're a little boring. They don't really do anything. Most VR games have hand animations that play based on what buttons you press on your controller. So I got to work creating the best hand animations you have ever seen. I would say they look pretty good, as long as you ignore the ring finger. So now, after perfectly adding the hand animations, I now have a fully functional hand in the game. Except I don't really have a game yet. What I have is two hands, I can interact with objects, but that's it. But I do have a vision, and I can't quite explain it with words, so I'm gonna be showing you my vision in paint. Okay, so you have some people here and they'll walk back and forth along a path, and there's a few layers of people. You'll be facing towards the people, and then you can pick up rocks from a table in front of you, and you might be wondering what you do with these rocks. Well, you throw them at the people, and when you hit the people, they will turn into ragdolls and fly across the map. And I know what you're thinking, this is the greatest VR game ever, and you would be right. Now I just have to make it. So as you saw before, the game is all about throwing rocks, which means I need to be able to throw objects, and to do that, I need to be able to pick up those objects. And the good thing is that Unity has a built-in system that lets you pick up objects in VR, and all you have to do is drag and drop some scripts, which means that I won't need to make a whole new system from the ground up. I made a new system from the ground up. And by new system, I mean this guy's system, and by from the ground up, I mean I copied it. And now I can pick up these cubes. Kind of. All right, with a few tweaks to the hands colliders, I'm now able to pick up these cubes, and I should be able to throw them. Or not. All right, so this grabbing system is really good, but it doesn't really work when you want to throw something. So what I did is I made a new system from the ground up. And by new system, I mean this guy's system, and from the ground up, I mean I copied it again. And now the throwing should work perfectly. Okay, no. Okay, this system doesn't work for throwing either. Which is weird, because the video I copied this system from shows that throwing works. So I definitely just did something wrong. But instead of trying to copy this guy's system again, I made a whole new system from the ground up. And by new system, I mean the Unity's built-in system. And now you can actually throw objects. You might be wondering why I didn't just use Unity's system from the beginning, and the main reason is that the system isn't perfect, because as you can see, when you pick up objects, they just kind of float there. I'm gonna be honest, I don't know how to fix this, so I'm just not going to. I've already spent a week stealing other people's VR grab systems, and I don't want to spend another week on this issue, so I'm just going to move on to the next part of the project, the enemies. So from the start of this project, I've wanted to make all of the models for this game myself. I especially want to make the enemy model, and this means that I need to learn how to 3D model because I have no idea what I'm doing. So I followed a Blender tutorial on how to make a 3D character, and I mean, I would say it looks pretty good, but then I started texturing, and oh my god. What have I created? This is the most terrifying thing I've ever seen. So I have an enemy, but right now he doesn't do anything. He just stands there, menacingly. And I want him to be able to walk around the level, and this means I'll need to create a rig for the model and then animate it. And that's a lot of work. Fortunately for me, there's a website called Mixamo that can automatically rig your character model. And all you need to do is drag in your character and assign a few bone positions. And there we go. Now I have a fully rigged model that I can apply animations to. I then found a good walk animation on Mixamo and downloaded it with my model, and then imported it into Unity. There's two of them now. Oh no. Also, if you're wondering why it's so bright around the enemy, that's because I exported the model with the default light from Blender. When I said I don't know what I'm doing, I wasn't lying to you. But I fixed all that, and now the enemy can walk. The next thing to do is turn the enemy into a ragdoll, so that when you hit them with a rock, they go flying, which ended up being pretty easy, and absolutely nothing went wrong. For some reason, the enemy just isn't here. Oh, okay, never mind. There he is. Then I wrote a script that'll turn off the enemy's animator and turn them into a ragdoll when I throw a rock at them. And I don't know if you noticed, but the enemy's a little bit big. So I shrunk them down to a normal size and then added a few more of them. And now I have a working prototype of the game. Where's the money? Oh, you're not gonna tell me? Okay, bye. Now that the enemy is pretty much done, I just need to finish the rock, because right now the rock, it doesn't really look like a rock. So I went back into Blender and made a pretty good rock model, and just in case you didn't know this was a rock, I made sure to label it for you. You're welcome. And now you can throw rocks at these defenseless human beings. But the game is still missing something. And can you guess what it is? Audio. So I went to the best place to get free sound effects. YouTube. YouTube is full of amazing sound effects that you can download. Whether or not downloading these sound effects is actually legal, I will not be commenting on that. So all I need to do is search for some rock sound effects, and okay, that's the wrong rock, but you know what? That gives me an idea. Okay, maybe that wasn't the best idea. So instead of using YouTube, I found a good sound effect on freesound.org, and then I edited it a little bit, and now the rocks are sounding great. Then I added a body impact sound effect whenever the enemies are hit. And the last thing to do is add some music, and I think I know what music to add. I don't know how to make music, but I also don't want to use someone else's free track, and that leaves me with only one option. Force a robot to make music for me. And I can actually do that. There's a website called Ecret Music that uses an AI to generate an original piece of music for you. All you need to do is choose your scene, your mood, and your genre, and then you just press the create music button until you get a banger. And sometimes it can take you a while, but let me tell you, I got a banger. And then with the music added, that should be all the audio I need to add to the game. The next thing to do is actually to make the game, because I don't really have a game yet. So I created a new scene in Unity and started laying out the map. My idea was to have the game take place on a street of a town, and then the enemies will just be walking along the street while the player's pummeling them with rocks. And why are they being pummeled by rocks, you might be wondering? Well, I'll leave that one up to the player. I don't really know. But now that I have the layout of the map finished, I just need to add some life into it. So I went back into Blender and I made a pretty simple looking tree, and okay, I don't think it's supposed to do that. So after fixing that issue, I just placed a bunch of trees around the level. Then I added some basic textures to the ground and then added a skybox. And the level is already looking really good. Now I just need to add a car model, house model, and fence model. And I started by working on the car model, and I'm actually pretty happy with how it turned out. Except for some reason, I exported it with the wrong colors. And I still have no idea how that's even possible, but I mean, what can you do? Making a house model was a lot easier than making the car, and all I ended up doing was creating a cube in Blender, and then I painted over top of it. And as you can tell, I am an extremely talented artist. And then for the fence, all I had to do was copy and paste a rectangle a few times. But then I added all of these models, and now the game is actually looking really good. Now, to add the gameplay. I've said that I want the enemies to walk along the street, but on its own, that's a little too boring. So instead, I want to have a wave system. I started by adding a big block of text in the sky that will tell you what wave you're on. And then I made a button that will trigger the first wave and start the game. And then now comes the complicated part of actually making the enemies move. I mean, it's probably not complicated, but again, I have no idea what I'm doing. But after days of work, I finally got everything working. So now I just add some more of these guys and everything should be working. They should just be walking past each other and... So maybe it's not working perfectly, but after a bit of time, I eventually got them working properly. Then I just added 2 more waves that would trigger if you took out every enemy in the current wave, and now I have a completed gameplay loop. But I still don't have any way for the game to end. Once you beat wave 3 or run out of rocks, nothing happens. I have a couple of ideas on what to do after either one of those scenarios happens. I started by working on what would happen if you won, which is actually pretty easy to do because the game is always tracking how many enemies are in play, and this is how the game knows how to transition to the next wave. So I can just use this to trigger a victory screen. Now, if you thought that victory screen was good, I can promise that the lose screen is even better. To track how many rocks are currently in place, I added a collision box inside of the room the player stands in. I set the collision box to be a trigger, and now I can count how many rocks the player has access to, which means that now I can add a lose screen whenever the player runs out of rocks. Yeah, I'm pretty proud of this. This is my greatest achievement right here. I also added a small delay when you throw out the last rock so that the lose screen doesn't immediately trigger. And now the game is complete, and I have single-handedly saved the VR game industry. But there is one last thing for me to do, and that's to make a trailer and release the game. I want this trailer to be the most amazing, most impactful trailer you have ever seen. So I worked for minutes to make sure this trailer is the greatest thing you have ever seen. If you don't already want to play this game, this trailer will definitely convince you. And here it is. That was truly a masterpiece. But now with the trailer finished, it's finally time to upload the game. I decided to call the game Gunk, and if you're wondering why Gunk, well, it's because all the enemies have the word Gunk on their shirts. Okay, so the itch.io page is now up, and you can go download and play Gunk for free, which you better be happy about, because I could charge full price for this game, but I decided to make it free, because I'm a nice person. But anyways, if you enjoyed, make sure to download Gunk and comment your favorite thing about the game, and no criticism or I will ban you. I'll see you in the next one.